Hello and welcome to today's episode of Talking HealthTech. I'm your host, Sophie, and today I'm joined by Whitney Luxford. Hey, Whit, how are you?
Good, Sophie. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, excited to have you here, and I'm excited to dive into your journey and actually, learn more about Fit to Fly. So for our audience, can you give us a sort of an overview of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my story's, I guess, quite unique. I'm a qualified paramedic who worked New South Wales Ambulance for a period of time. But prior to that, I had actually worked for ANZ Australia, so a 65-year-old company, Australian company, and I actually worked there as crew and in learning and development. ANZ collapsed, so I looked for what was I going to do next. So I went in to become a paramedic, which I absolutely loved, but it was pretty trying and taxing with shift work and 4 young children, etc. So a role became available at Virgin Australia. I had no idea what I was going into. It ended up being a role where it was to help set up the training department for flight and cabin crew for the international airline, which was flying from Australia overseas with a brand new aircraft type into the country, which was really exciting. But what happened was they had only 5 aeroplanes and they were having a significant amount of medical diversions from people becoming unwell mid-flight. Now, Virgin Australia or Virgin Blue back then was the domestic carrier. They didn't have an in-house medical department. But when they built the international airline, the framework around, and I guess the health governance was really quite advanced. So they had amazing medical kits on board. They had this whiz-bang telemetry equipment, and then they had ground-based support. So they couldn't understand why were they having really costly medical diversions of quite significant medical events. So I was asked to review that. And this is where my foray into aviation medicine started. I just fell into it because I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right experience and qualifications, and it went from there. And so I built my career specialising in aviation medicine. I went to Monash Uni and did the certification in aerospace medicine down there, and then really crafted my experience around that. So set up a medical department for Virgin Australia and had a role there. And then eventually after 8 years went to Qantas and worked in their medical department for the last 10 years. So really built this around what I loved, which was medicine and aviation, and got to work in a really niche area of aviation, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's one that we often sort of just don't even realise that it's there. Now, I've caught a few flights myself, and I've never been, I've never seen a medical in-flight emergency or a diversion. How often do they happen?
So one in 40 flights around the world have an in-flight event. Now, that can be from a simple vomit or syncope nosebleed all the way up to a cardiac arrest. And then of those that are really serious, about 1 in 50 are quite significant. So where you can result in a diversion of an aircraft or, unfortunately, a death on board. So it's quite significant in terms of, for that person, obviously, they're at 40,000 feet in an aluminium tube with, certainly not an emergency department around the corner. There are definitely some resources available on board and on the ground that support the crew and any medically qualified volunteer. And then, we've got the issue with diverting an aircraft, which is obviously very costly. It can impact on safety because quite often the pilots are having to land into airports that they're not used to landing into. Don't worry, they do train for those in the simulator very often. But still, it's, you've got to land in there. It might be different weather conditions. And then often they don't have the support on the ground. So sometimes people do get stuck there for quite some time. And we have this safety thing around our crew and how long they fly for in terms of their duty limitations, their hour duty limitations. So it can be quite disruptive for everybody, including the patient themselves. And you're very lucky not to have ever been called because every time I get on a plane, there's an event.
Well, I won't fly with you.
No.
We have a term for that in the emergency department,
Yes,
but I don't know that it's safe for the airways.
Save an ambulance. I'm not the same in ambulance. I am on a plane.
Yeah. Okay. So then this amalgamation of all of your experiences has brought you to developing Fit to Fly. Can you tell me a little bit about what Fit to Fly does?
So Fit to Fly was born out of, a combination of 30 years of experience working in medical departments and managing passenger medical clearances. So airlines require passengers with certain medical conditions, post-surgery, pregnant women, exacerbation of chronic conditions, etc., that are all impacted by altitude, to have a self-declaration and complete a medical clearance form, which is a paper-based form. Each airline has their own form, and every form, you won't be surprised, is different. And so it creates a lot of confusion for a passenger who's traveling on multiple airlines and has to get their doctor to fill out a form for each particular flight, which seems, in my mind, has always been quite archaic and a bit behind the times. So I set about to solve this problem because I had lived experience, but I not only had the airline lived experience, I was also talking to passengers, doctors, hospitals, etc., everybody that was in this ecosystem to move people safe and well, and what their issues were around this. So when I left Qantas, I set about to set up Fit to Fly to develop a digital platform. So it's a digital health platform to solve the problem, but it's not just to complete or replace a manual-based form. We actually built clinical logic. So there's actually clinical guidelines out there in the international aviation arena that are created by medical advisors from different airlines around the world and based on best evidence medicine around when a passenger is safe with particular conditions or post-surgery. And we built those in as a clinical algorithm and a decision tree in the back end. So essentially, instead of a doctor who may not have knowledge of aviation medicine, which is probably 99% of doctors around the world, I hate to say, it's usually physics in year one for an hour and then they forget it. So they're not having to know everything about AvMed. It's already built in. The customer can see the application process from end to end. And as soon as the doctor completes the medical questionnaire, and answers those questions relevant to the conditions for that particular patient and hit submit, in 80% of cases, it will give it an approval straight away, as opposed to the paper process at the moment, which is really manual and complex, shuffling between the customer, their doctor and the airline and waiting for an approval can be anywhere from 2 days up to 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So ours will do it in 2 minutes.
Wow. Isn't it amazing when we can make things talk to each other and have a bit of logic? Thank God for technology.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing is you've got customers who apply for a medical clearance sometimes when they've already booked a flight or before they book a flight. Now, it's quite an anxiety-provoking issue because they often are sitting there waiting to hear whether or not they've actually been approved medically to travel. And that, as you know, you get closer to the date of travel, the fares increase. Some people might not be able to afford that, so then they abandon that travel. Other people think that they just won't get a clearance and then run the gauntlet. That's where we end up with those other problems I was talking about.
Yeah.
Or, you get to the airport and you might say that you're not feeling that great, or you might be displaying signs. And the staff are pretty, they're very well trained to pick up on any nuances of someone maybe not being 100% fit to travel. And it's never too late until that aircraft door's closed to, maybe have you reassessed and go away and actually get a medical clearance. So really the whole process is designed to keep people safe and well and to reduce those in-flight events.
So what happens when you get unwell in flight? Or if you get on a flight unwell, I guess, give me the year 2 physics that we've missed out on.
So one thing I've always said throughout my career to people, friends, etc., doctors, is if you're getting on a plane unwell, you are definitely not getting any better at altitude. Even with something like a hangover, you will feel twice as bad at altitude. And that is because the partial pressure is lower And so there is a reduced oxygen level. Now, for most of us healthy people, it doesn't really affect us. It affects us in the sense of you get off and you feel fatigued, jet lag, you might feel as, you a bit dry. But that's because it's the environment you're in and you're just sitting. So if you're sitting and not exerting yourself, you're not having to have an increase, rate of work, of breathing, etc. So you're not using more than you need. So most of us are quite good sitting in that environment. Now, it's those people who have heart conditions, lung conditions, even 2 weeks post-stroke, for example, we recommend you have oxygen. Obviously, any blood disorder where the hemoglobin is impacted, which obviously carries oxygen, those conditions could be impacted. But also anything that has gas involved, or any kind of swelling from trauma. So bleeding, localized bleeding into tissues, etc. So something as simple as being on a bucks party, falling down off the curb, being a little bit inebriated on the Gold Coast, and breaking your arm and getting on a plane the next day with a fresh plaster cast is a no-no. Because you're going to have a lot of tissue damage, a lot of bleeding into the local area. And if you've got a plaster cast that's solid around that fracture, you're going to have swelling and you might get off with quite a blue hand, which is obviously not good for, form and function later on in your arm. So that cast has to be split in half. And then when you get on the ground, you can have it, reattended to. So something as simple as that can impact, your wellness at flying. So these are really simple things. Some are way more complicated. Closed head injuries, for example, and this is what a lot of young people, they don't get travel insurance. They travel overseas to developing countries or underdeveloped countries, and they ride, mopeds, quad bikes, fall off, hit the head, have a closed injury, and then get on a flight, and then we've got a real problem because we've got swelling within the brain area, fractures, etc. So these are all the things that impact at altitude. So that's, talking about a lot of things other than just getting on with a bit of a head cold or, not feeling great because you've had too much to drink.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there. I'm feeling like I want to learn more about aviation medicine and head that way. It's certainly, there's a lot there. I'm just my head's just going, no, that all makes sense, and it's things that you just don't think about. Especially if you like the great example of the bucks party, you attend those people in the emergency department. That's great. See you later. But there's like that crucial part of like, well, what else is happening? Where have you come from? How are you getting home? Do we need to, make sure that you are safe going beyond that? So then Fit to Fly comes in. I've been on this wild bucks party, like Yenzip in my voice. And I can then, I've had this injury, I can then jump on Fit to Fly and request, or would I have to get the emergency department?
Yeah, so look, it works a couple of different ways. It depends who's initiating the actual application. Yep. So at the moment, a customer or a doctor would go to the relevant airline's website, print the form off, complete the form, scan it to the airline medical team would review it, and then you would hopefully receive an email that tells you you're good to go. Now, as I said, that can be 48 hours. It could be 2 weeks. It depends on their workload. Now, with Fit to Fly, what we aim to do is you would go to the airline's website still, but you would click on a link to our a URL, which is into our platform. If you are the passenger patient, you would initially create you would sign in and you would create your profile, and you just do that once, which is designed for people who travel a lot, particularly business people. And then you would nominate your doctor. So your doctor might already be in the system where you can add your doctor, and your doctor would get a notification. They would create their profile. The difference between the paper system and Fit to Fly for doctors is that we are integrated with AHPRA and the Medical Council of New Zealand. And as we roll out globally, we'll integrate with, the UK, the US, China, etc. They're medical regulatory bodies, so we know that we've got a bona fide doctor completing the form. We haven't over time seen too many issues with that that we've caught out, but we've seen a couple in airlines where people are filling out the form and they shouldn't be. Then the doctor would answer the questions relevant to your condition or conditions. The beauty about it is the doctor doesn't have to be thinking, okay, they've got this particular condition, I'm answering these questions, but there's other things to be asked. The system is intuitive enough to be able to ask additional questions based on how the doctor's answered the previous question. So it's collating a whole lot of information. If it doesn't get approved, where by the time it gets to the airline medical department, it's got all the information they need to be able to know, is it an extra day? Is it some additional support on the aircraft? What do they need? Once the doctor's completed the questionnaire, they then hit submit, and if they're in 80% of cases, they should get an approval straight away. The customer at their end will get a notification, plus on their dashboard they'll see an approval, the doctor will see an approval, and the airline will see an approval. Now, in your instance where, let's say, you're in the emergency department and you initiate it for the customer, hospitals can initiate the form because we built it also very much around the need for remote and rural travel within Australia, which there's a hell of a lot. And this is one of the problems I sought to solve because it was always an issue. We move a lot. I don't think probably general public understand how many patients we move from remote and regional towns into big cities for treatment. And those people might come down on an RFDS, or something like that, urgently air ambulance, but often they get sent back on commercial flights. And we have so many problems with those clearances. So it's no different. The doctor in the ED can go in and answer the questions and then submit it, and then they would know then and there that that patient is good to go to the airport and fly. I guess the big thing is knowing what is their mode of transport. And this is one thing, I guess, in my campaign. I see we've got Fit to Fly as the solution, but I also see there's two big aspects. There's the customer passenger awareness. I've got a condition, I'm flying, I need to see if I need a clearance, but then the doctor side. So, we know that patients are seeing GPs all around the country, tens of thousands of times a day. And a lot of those people are asking the question, hey, doc, I'm going overseas for X period of time. Can I have my scripts filled? Now, that should be a huge flag to GPs about, whoa, you're flying overseas and you've got this list of medications and you fall into one of the categories where we maybe need to do a medical clearance. And so that's my kind of mission. One thing was to build the site and the platform and have it working, but my next one is to educate doctors around the need, and the second one is to increase that awareness around the passengers.
Yeah. So lots of challenges in there, and I know many of the interviews I do, I talk to people with technology solutions that are doing it directly in the health sector, so either into the hospitals or GP clinic. You're tackling airline health, which feels like a whole different beast of its own. What has that been like?
Yeah, look, airline health it's an amazing world. I've had some of the most amazing experiences that I would never have had, and even people within airlines don't get to have. I've been very fortunate throughout my career. I've learned a lot. I've had amazing doctors that I've worked with and alongside and reported into who've been fabulous mentors and who are the best in their field around the world. But, airlines are a very interesting environment. They have some silos still. And we saw this during COVID. The silos were completely broken down because we were brought down to such a small workforce throughout the entire organisation, literally 50 people in a room making decisions really quickly. And it was one thing that I really hoped that we could continue to do post-COVID. But my understanding is that hasn't really been the case. And I guess, the necessity of what we had to do then was so crucial that we didn't really have an option. They are really slow in their procurement and sales cycle, so probably no different to hospitals and health. But they're also very focused on what the customer experience is. So they spend a lot of a lot of their time and money and resources, obviously, into having safe aircraft flying, into having their pilots well trained and their crew well trained, but also what that customer experience is from, buying a ticket, checking in, bag drop, bag collection, in-flight service, those sorts of things. So there's things like these, the medical clearance process that has just been ticking along. No one likes it. We're all kind of, not another one, where the form hasn't been filled out properly and we've got to chase somebody for the answer. That really was right for the picking to solve. And it's not the only problem in aviation and airline health, I would say, that is sitting there waiting to be solved. So I'm just doing one at a time at the moment. But this was a big one for me because it really has such wide impact for lots of reasons that I've explained.
So what's on the horizon then, I guess, with Fit to Fly? What are the next what's next for you?
Yeah, so we're working with, we built an MVP a year ago when we validated that at a large aviation health conference where all the airline medical directors go to in London last year. We came back, we started again and built a bespoke platform from the ground up. That's now finalised, tested, and we're now talking to potential customers. Look, that sales cycle for airlines can be 6 to 12 months. It can be extremely long. We've partnered with Medair, who has the monopoly in the world for airline medical assistance. So they provide air-to-ground medical support if there's an in-flight event. They look after crew when they're upline, so traveling for work and they become ill. They also do what we call a gate screen. So if you're at that airport before the door closes and you're appearing not to be well, the airline can contact Medair. So that's a really strategic partnership for us because they have 180 airlines and we've been working really closely with them and talking to airlines in conjunction with them. So that's huge for us. That means we don't have to have a sales and distribution team around the world, which is also great. We're leveraging off them because they're already talking to those major airlines. And then the next thing will be once we onboard, implement, obviously increasing the number of airlines we've got. But our next tech piece will be around incorporating the ability for customers when building their profile to build in anything around disability and accessibility with their travel. So one problem is electric wheelchairs. So at the moment, the airlines don't really have a way to store your electric wheelchair information, which means often you have to give it every time you travel. And I've seen too many times when that customer has been put in a chair to go to their seat and their electric wheelchair's on the air bridge being measured and weighed, and then everybody realises that aircraft's hold, so underneath the belly where the bags go, that won't fit in there, and we've already put the customer on the aircraft. So it's not a great scenario. And it's a really complex piece of aviation travel, to be honest. You think getting a bag from one spot to another is difficult, because you're waiting for your bag to come out. But then electric wheelchairs and other medical equipment is quite challenging. Batteries, weights, all those things we have to consider. So we're looking to build out that profile for the customer where they don't have to keep telling airlines time and time again. They can just opt to share this information with them.
Brilliant. There's, so many aspects there that you guys are going to make a huge difference.
We hope so. We're just looking forward to onboarding those first airline clients and start to see the platform working and really building the profile of it. In tandem with, as I said, that educational and awareness piece for both the passenger and for their doctors.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so informative. I've learnt so much. My head's just bursting with right. Never thought of that. So thank you. Thank you for your time and look forward to seeing what happens and where things go.
Thanks, Sophie, very much. Lovely to talk to you and your audience today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking HealthTech. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.